starting.
Said
Do I
I got
clap?
the cottage. I mean, are you recording with the?
No. No, but you told me to clap.
Oh, you can clap if you want to. Bring good energy to the new season.
Charlie, you're just hitting one note, man. It's a great note. Most not use it lots of times. Practice. Listen to my music with good taste. Charlie, practice does wonders with good taste. And sorry, Charlie. Broadcasting gets to be practiced. Broadcasting 100% solid like spring water.
Hello, everyone. We are finally back from the north. It's been a
Yeah,
few months, but
yeah.
we did it. We are back as we said we would be. Both Edu and I had some life things to deal with because unfortunately we are actually not funded by the CIA
Yet.
yet. So we have to, have some day jobs. We actually both moved to different cities. Edu moved from London to where are you, Edu, again? I always forget the Canadian cities.
I don't
Toronto?
want. I
He's
don't
in
want to be.
Toronto.
I don't want to get doxxed, but let's say I'm in the vicinity of the great city of Toronto.
And I'm in New York City. I don't think they'll be able to find me, but I came from Miami to New York. And actually, Edu and I met in Montreal right as we finished our last season.
Yes,
So
it was nice.
Edu, yeah, I'm actually like way taller than
No,
Edu. Who
she's
would have
not.
thought?
No, she's not. No, she's not. She's like about my height, which is not a lot, but she's not taller. Definitely not taller. How's it going? It's been a minute.
It's been a long time. I mean, Edu and I, of course, have been still talking about the crazy things that have been happening in the world. And actually, when we were discussing how to start our podcast again, Edu said, the world right now is the worst it's been since we started this podcast. So there's
It is
that.
true. I feel that I think I told you this, but I want to say it again. Like I feel every generation thinks they're living in the worst possible times ever, and when you look at the big scheme of things, it's really not that true. People living today are living better than what we were living 50, 100, 200 years ago. But in the short term, compared to where we were a few months ago when we stopped recording, I will say we're definitely worse. The economy is crappy, crappier than ever. Here in North America, you guys have no idea how bad inflation is getting. I know. And listen, we're Venezuelans. We know about hyperinflation. I lived through hyperinflation, and obviously it's a completely different situation. But it's just crazy to see inflation getting close to like 10% and like seeing how your wage every month it's valued less and less and less and less. When I was in Venezuela, I only saw this happening through my mom, through my family, who were the ones that were actually working. I was just a student. But now it's happening to me, and it sucks. It's like if it was $200 that I have to spend on food every month, now it is 300, and then it's 350.
Right? I think, Edu, that's why it's hitting harder. Like, because we have been through recessions in the States before since I've lived there. But this is the first time I'm buying my own food. And now it's like, yeah, it feels very adult to be like, inflation has me fucked.
I had to cancel like subscriptions to like Disney, HBO. Sounds very bougie and stupid in the big scheme of things, but I I I have to do it. I have to like I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and I have a relatively good job now, and I live in paycheck to paycheck. It's terrible. War is still going on in Europe, and we still haven't seen the full ramifications of the consequences of that. Uh, but I'm pretty sure we will soon. Even though I think they've reached an agreement with the exports of grain and whatnot. Uh, there's still a war going on, and Russia and Ukraine produce a lot of the grain that we consume all around the world. So that's going to be an issue. Uh, China is showing its fangs against to Taiwan, so that's another thing. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to be the situation in a month from now. Um, they want to get Shakira imprisoned. That's probably the worst thing that is happening right now. And I will say though, I feel the irony of a Latin American person being charged with tax evasion. I think it's tax evasion.
Yeah.
By the Spanish crown. That's 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 that that's stupid.
Mind
Like
you, I
she
joked around a lot with this because I hate when people are like focusing on like the crimes of the Spanish crown, like AMLO, the Mexican president, that like he won't talk about current issues but wants the King of Spain to apologize. So I was just kidding, but it is like kind of ironic. I'm like,
it
after
is.
you've stolen so much from Latin America, especially because Shakira is our queen, it's like, do
She
not come for our
is.
Hispanic queen.
This is not tax evasion. This is reparations. Like this is just the way things should be. We should be tax exempt in Europe. All of us. All of us. But anyway.
Well, and also we're still dealing with COVID, by the way. Like
Oh
President
yeah.
Biden just actually he finally tested negative after like 2 bouts of testing positive, and monkeypox was just declared a national health emergency as
Fuck.
well. So,
Have you
oh, and polio is back. Ew, polio is back.
Yeah, things can only get better. Have you seen how fucked like monkeypox is? Like the bruises that people are getting. It's horrible. It's disgusting. Like
It's
I
horrible, and it's also particularly affecting the gay community. So it's really terrible what's going on because they have a vaccine, but they don't have enough vaccines. Now they're like asking people to like share vaccines, basically, like a little bit of dosage per person. And it's horrible what's going on. Like the situation is not under control at all, especially in cities like New York and San Francisco.
Is it really that bad in New York right now with monkeypox?
Oh yeah. It's well,
Oh,
we already in the States have like of course the most cases in the world, so
as it is, as it is,
as
and more importantly than that, Biden getting out of COVID. I had COVID like 2 weeks ago. It sucked. Like I thought I was gonna be one of those guys that would say like, yes, I never got COVID. I survived COVID the whole 2 years and I never got it, and I fucking got it, and it was the worst. I was bedridden for like an entire weekend, which sucks because if you get it during the week, at least you get some time off work. But I got it during the weekend, and then I had to come back to work on Monday virtually, obviously, because I'm not gonna make anyone sick.
right.
But it was tough. But
Well, I
I
still
guess
haven't had it, so at least one half of from the north remains strong.
uh well, knock on wood, you don't get it. Although I will laugh if you do. I'm kidding.
Oh my god, knock on wood, actually. But so Ella and I wanted to talk to you guys because we kind of are gonna do things differently on season 2 from the north. Like you probably are noticing now, we want to be more conversational and more kind of like because Ella and I would have these like amazing discussions in our post production and pre production meetings, and kind of like a lot of things
Better than the
that
podcast. Better than the podcast.
right. But I think a lot of it is things that at least I was afraid to say. It was more like cultural things that I was like, what is going on here? Like everyone is saying that this is going on, but I don't see it that way, but I'm scared to say it out loud. And we used to talk more, about like very complex political issues, which of course we will still be keeping tabs on authoritarianism across the world, particularly in the countries we always talk about, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, Ukraine, Syria, Iran, etc. But we want to talk more about cultural issues and more generalize how these issues of authoritarianism aren't only political. These can be cultural issues, and we're actually seeing how the authoritarian powers that we're always talking about use these cultural fights to get ahead and to divide the citizens of democracies. So Edo and I really just want to get down to it and have the balls to say what we really think about these things and speak up, because my whole point is that if we're all afraid of, like, all of us who agree that things are going too far with their obsession with identity politics and the division, I always say we're too afraid to talk and we're going to end up losing our freedom. Well, let's start here and not be afraid to say what we really think, right?
Absolutely. So this is the season that we're gonna get canceled. No, but we're gonna have a more honest conversation about the things that are happening. And yeah, we're gonna try to make it more cultural rather than focus on the news cycle, whatever's happening that week. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, please let us know. There's a comment section. Make sure to subscribe. If you like our content, give us a like, share with your friends and family who may think like we do or may not, especially if they don't think like we do, because that's the whole point of the show. We
Totally.
can
And if you don't agree with us, please leave a comment explaining, because what we want to do here is look at arguments from all sides.
Yeah.
So by all means, like, give us good arguments against what we think.
but be nice, because we're sensitive and we will cry. Like, that's gonna happen. That's granted. So what we wanted to talk about today. Oh, by the way, full disclosure, because we're an honest show. We want to be honest with you guys. We actually recorded one episode before this, but the files got corrupted, and we had such a hard time to like move files around. It was a mess. It was a good episode, but it just wasn't meant to be, I guess. So this is our re-recording of the first episode of the season, and this time we're not going to talk about the same things that we talked in the first episode. We actually want to have a topic for this one, and we wanted to talk. We already kind of hinted it, or Harry did a few minutes ago, but we've talked before about identity politics in this podcast and how we feel about it. Spoiler alert: we don't love them. Especially how it affects the Hispanic, the Latino community. But it's something that drives the day-to-day life of everyone here in North America. It's something that if you're coming from a different area of the world, especially like ourselves who come from Latin America, it's definitely a cultural shock. You kind of get used to it, but it's never, when you really think about it, it's not really a nice thing to see. So to get into this topic, we actually, or Hair, definitely want to talk about something that happened with the Muppets. Was it the Muppets?
It's Sesame Street.
Sesame
By the way,
Street.
I've never watched. Did you watch Sesame Street in Venezuela? I didn't have that channel. I don't know the characters. I
watched it a little bit when I was a kid, but I wasn't like, I was watching Dragon Ball.
So this topic is actually perfect to show what we want to do, because I'm truly confused. Like, I want to have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone who is watching this show has seen the scandal we're talking about, where there is a Sesame Street character in, I think it's a Sesame Street park, and the character was walking around, in the parade, and then two adorable little black girls like were saying hi and like trying to get a hug, and then the character kind of goes like this and doesn't hug them, and then proceeds to hug a white little girl. Well, the video of that went viral, and everyone is I would say everyone I've seen online is 1,000% convinced that this is systemic racism. Now my honest question is, am I missing something that can make us sure that this performer under this costume did this because of racism? I understand that then some people started putting a bunch of videos together and did a montage that showed that this was indeed systemic. I only heard about this. I haven't seen it yet. But the family now is saying that the little girls are traumatized, and they are suing the park for like millions and millions of dollars. This has become a huge thing. And now Rosita, which was the character, has been removed from this park. And of course, Rosita is the Hispanic character. So we are now fighting racism by eliminating Rosita from Sesame Street. Like, how is it Rosita's fault, first of all, if it was this performer? I just have so many questions. How do we know it was always the same performer doing these repeated offenses? Who is a performer? Like, how? Ew, what am I missing?
I don't know. It's honestly, I'm gonna say it first. It's an ingenious move from the family to sue the park. I think.
Well, if I was them, I would do it. Like, are you kidding me? Seeing how the world was reacting to it, 1,000% sure that it was racism.
Absolutely, take care of the political climate and get millions. How much is the lawsuit for? Is it like?
It's literally hundreds, I think. And also now I don't remember what character, but now other videos of similar situations with other cartoon characters are coming out, and people are saying it's because of racism.
$25 million.
Oh, sorry.
Class action lawsuit. It's not any lawsuit. It's a class.
And it's a class. Correct.
This is insane. Obviously, if there was an issue of systemic racism of this particular performer not wanting to hug kids of color, that is horrible. But $25 million horrible? I
But
don't
how are we
know.
sure? What
I
I
don't
need to know, please,
know.
in the comments. I'm sure people that follow me are 1,000% sure that it was racism. Please let me know what I have missed. What is the detail that is like for sure this is racism? Because, as Edu said, for people who aren't from the United States, this obsession with race is really strange. However, for people that come from countries where an authoritarian populace has established a dictatorship, a left wing one particularly, by using resentment and stoking hatred because of inequality and stoking that resentment over classism and racism, which of course is real and it's a thing in every country. But this is what politicians use to get ahead, distract us with these issues while they do other shit that's we should be paying attention to instead of this.
It's populism 101, and it's something that it's being pushed both by the left and by the right in the United States, because that's just easier to make politics like that rather than actually talking to the issues of the people. If you have a nation that's obsessed with race, you can use race to antagonize each other and galvanize the people that are voting for you. And yeah, like us coming from Venezuela, we got a government that's quote unquote, many quote unquote progressive, but not really. It's extremely conservative, but it uses its fake progressivism, and especially when it talks about race, to antagonize the people from every social class of the country,
And they take
to
advantage
gain
of
more
it,
support.
ew,
Absolutely.
to spread their propaganda abroad, because
Yeah.
the Venezuelan regime and the Cuban regime understands, the Russian regime understands this American obsession with race. So who do you think are the bots online pushing the Sesame Street story and pushing, the idea that all the like X amount of shows are racist, and that's their strength against us. They can't fight us militarily yet anyway, or economically yet anyway. So they go on Twitter and get Americans riled up about race.
And it's such a stupid thing. Like, obviously racism is an issue, don't take me out of context, but listen to the headline: $25 million class action lawsuit. That means that there are many people involved in this lawsuit over a Sesame Street character not hugging kids. It's it's ridiculous.
By the way, I am afraid of getting canceled just by this conversation we're having. Like, I think it's possible.
Whatever.
And I want to say, because I'm scared, I do understand, like, Latin American had slavery too, like the US did. However, the history of racism is so much darker, I think, in the US now because of segregation. It's so recent, Jim Crow and all of that. I do perfectly understand that. Those wounds are so recent, and that's one of the soft spots in American society that we're all so sensitive about, because that's our horrible sin that's so recent. I do understand that. However, is eliminating Rosita from Sesame Street the solution?
I'm eliminating a Hispanic character from Sesame Street because of the alleged actions of an individual performer. Yeah, it is ridiculous. But going back to America and its like obsession with race, this is also something that you don't see in other parts of the world. And my comparison always goes to Latin America because that's obviously what my context is. That's where I was born and raised, and moved out of Latin America when I was 20. And it also, like you said, segregation was a thing that was so recent that there are people alive who lived through segregation. And it's not like saying, oh, there were people alive who went through World War II. Yeah, they're like 200 years old, but the people who were alive during segregation are the age of my mom. They're like in their 70s, in their 80s. They perfectly remember the things that, especially black people, remember the things that they went through when they were little. But this also sh- showcases that because it was so recent, there hasn't been time to properly heal the wounds. And instead of the American society and the American politicians of actually reflecting on this and coming together as a nation of people that have many different backgrounds, many different skin colors, many different languages, it is used to galvanize people from one political extreme or the other. Because yes, we've talked about how this is used by the progressive left to send a populist message, but this is also used by the conservative right that plays and panders to white nationalism, which is a thing that doesn't make sense that it exists in 2022.
Well, they have their own identity issues. I think the far right has, now they're obsessed with saying that gay people are grooming kids. Like their identity issues is being straight Christian, I guess.
Their identity, like the issue with the issue with the right is that they have been convinced that the way that America was before was better than the way that it is now. This is a typical populist rhetoric. Not every populist uses it, but a lot of populists do use it, and "Make America Great Again" is a perfect example of this. But that the whole idea of like ethnic replacement, like the way that they convince a lot of these white folks that immigration is bad, for example, is by telling them that if they let migrants come into the country, the white race is going to disappear. These are
Yeah, of course. By the way, like right wing speakers and commentators and authors like Ann Coulter are completely transparent about this. Like this is literally what they say, that they're trying that Democrats are trying to change the ethnic composition of the country so they will always be winning elections. However, things are now turning around because one of the things we're going to be talking about here is that minorities, particularly Hispanics, but also African Americans, are becoming Republicans.
Yes.
So what are they going to say now?
They're-
Now the left is trying to say that Hispanics are actually white, so it all fits in the boxes that they understand.
You know what? You know what's silly? I like it. It's one of those times that I realize that this whole situation is ridiculous. Do you know Anya Taylor-Joy, the actress?
Yes.
Yes, she is Latina. She's Argentinian.
The Queen's Gambit,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, or Argentinian Queen.
Argentinian queen, but she's whiter than Snow White. Like she's so white that she actually played a Viking character in a recent movie, The Norseman. Great movie, by the way. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's by the same guy that made The Lighthouse. It's amazing. But I remember when she won an award. I don't know if it was what award specifically it was, or she was nominated for an award. Some outlets came out to say, "Oh, congratulations to the first person of color to be nominated to this award or whatever." And like, it shocked everyone because for us in Latin America, hearing Anya Taylor-Joy being called person of colors is just funny because it doesn't get wider than Anya Taylor-Joy. And for progressive people, they were so mad that a white person was being called person of color because that implies a different situation, which there is some truth to that. But it just serves to explain the point that.
But that's the problem that these people have gotten to with Hispanics. And it's all, again, like, I am sensing this, like, rising rhetoric against Hispanics from the left as they turn Republican, and they involve it with race. Because back then, when they thought all immigrants are going to be Democratic and their descendants will be voting Democrat forever, then they said that Hispanics were all people of color. Now look, that was never true, of course, but they never realized this, and now they don't know what to do with us because, right, Hispanic is an ethnicity. There are Black Hispanics, white Hispanics, Asian Hispanics, But even I am confused. Ew. I need someone to tell me if I'm a woman of color or not. Because like online, whenever I talk against socialism, they tell me I'm white. But like I've been called a spick like lots of
See,
times.
here's the
So
thing.
so
Here's what I think. Here's what I want to think. It doesn't matter. Race is a social construct. Race was invented to justify racism and white superiority and slavery and all those horrible things. But at the end of the day, we're all part of the same race, the human race. And it's been said,
But it's
and it's been
also
said a lot. But like thinking all these things, like, oh my God, what color am I? Am I a person of color? It doesn't matter. Like the conversation is not what.
no, but I disagree because it's not, people that say like, oh, I don't see color, I'm colorblind. Like that's also not the solution because at the end of the day, like I said, no matter if like these commies tell me I'm white, so I can't talk about Venezuela, the reality is that I have experienced discrimination, whether it's because of my accent, because of my name, because of X amount of things. So it's not, there are differences, but how do we go about them in a way that doesn't further divide us?
See, this is why my take is. I feel that we should never forget that these things exist. That although race is a social construct, racism exists, and us being people of color, inevitably in this society, we're gonna be victims.
So
of
you are
racism.
saying we are people of color? I'm serious. Are we or not?
I mean,
Someone in the comments, let us know, please. Let me know.
I mean,
what I am.
we're yes, we're brown. Like if that's what we're trying to get at, like yes, we are brown. But what I'm trying to say is that although we should be in perspective as individuals and as a society to understand that some things that we're taking for granted, things that we conceptualize as being normal, in society, in the way that, and it's a truth that this society is biased towards the white straight male. That doesn't mean that when we see ourselves, we need to fall under this mold of what society
Agreed.
has told us that we should be. Like, you are Hispanic, therefore you exist, rather than you exist and you're Hispanic.
That's also something that concerns me about this American obsession with identity politics. And we should probably have an episode on this as well. What is it? Critical race theory. It's one of those phrases that means something else for different people.
Yeah.
So for the right, it means that they're teaching little white kids that they're horrible and they're evil from the time they're born.
Yeah.
And then if you talk to the left, it just means that you teach about American history and slavery and segregation.
Yep.
I think I've seen teachers go about it both ways. And what I don't want is usually a white teacher, because they're the ones obsessed with race the most, telling my little brown kids that their life is going to be some type of way because they're brown. I don't like that.
It's a prejudice. It's like that is the main issue. Like, we should not ignore that racism is a thing, but we should not make our whole minds about people based on race. And this is something that, although we tend to associate with the right and the casual racism and the usual racism that you would experience from mostly white people that are very ignorant against people of color. This is something that also translates to people that on the other side of the aisle take it too far. And these are folks that would say things that I don't agree with. For example, that promoters of ethno-nationalism, of like radical Pan-Africanism, radical Pan-Latin Americanism, that we should stick to our own people, and that's the way that we're gonna fight the evil white man. I don't think, like, again, like, the way that I see these things is that ideally the society that we need to be is a society where we don't judge people by their identity, being their origin, their country of origin, their skin color, their gender,
that's
their
the rule. I mean,
sexuality.
that should be the idea at the end of the day,
Yes.
right? Not judging people by their skin tone. But let's
We
get
should
serious. Now it's
push
become
that
a
way.
trend to say like white synonymous to lame, shitty, racist. Like, I know I don't want to use the wrong word because people say can't use, like, you can't be racist against white people because they have all the power, whatever. You know what I'm talking about? They
Yeah.
say, like, whatever the word is. But my friends, I see it on my everyday life. My friends use the word white interchangeably with lame.
And
You know?
and at the end of the day, that gives you a bad perception of society, because it goes back to this thing of what has happened in 2016 and 2020, where you see uh Latin Americans and African Americans and Asian Americans going and voting for the Republican Party, because
Turns out it wasn't enough to be a minority, to be a certain type of way
not,
when you vote.
not only that, but like, who are the progressive ones? Mostly white people. Like,
It's always the annoying. See,
It-
I'm doing it again. I'm sorry. I even indulge in it sometimes because it's become such a cultural thing. But it is true. The annoying wokes are white people.
yes, they are. Yes, they are. But because we have sold this narrative that white people are the conservative bad people, and people of color are the ones that are the proletariat, that they're liberal, like they vote blue. You realize that people are voting blue are people making it over $100,000 a year, living in like very good cities in New York, in Los Angeles, in Seattle, and mostly
And this
white.
has been the case for decades, but now the disconnect is showing, because for decades that has been the case, that the elite votes blue, but somehow, you know, it was like, yeah, minorities and those who are struggling vote blue. But now things are shifting. The working class
Yeah.
is no longer going Democrat. So
It's not. The working class is voting red.
and it's not because they're racist against, and this is what I'm talking about, like the rhetoric that's emerging against Hispanics. I mean, we've talked about it on this show before, like whenever, I think in the last elections we had that it's been showing that Hispanics are massively turning Republican, and then we start seeing think pieces as to why in the liberal white media. Oh, it's internalized white supremacy. It's because it's mostly Cubans and Venezuelans traumatized by socialism,
Or
so
they would
hate poor
they would
people.
have like the token
know.
progressive Latin American person being the one writing the article, but at the end of the day, the editorial is wider than white bread. So
Anyway, I work in the media here, and as someone who wants to be a pundit, I know that if I wanted to say the reasons I believe why Hispanics are turning away from the Democratic Party, which I've written about at length, and you can look it up, they're not going to put me on CNN or NBC. Sadly, only conservative media would be interested in what my take is. And they're only going to put Jorge Ramos's daughter, who says the problem is that Venezuelans and Cubans are racist. She's the only one that gets to go on NBC.
Like, that contributes to the radicalization and the polarization of people, because if I'm a Latino living in North America and I'm thinking like you are thinking, for example, and I want to hear what you have to say about this, my only outlet, my only option to listen to what you have to say, it's conservative media, which, yes, will come with your commentary, which I could appreciate, but it would also come with a whole lot of bullshit that I don't necessarily agree with. But if I don't have the mind to discern what's right from what's wrong, then I'm gonna fall down the rabbit hole. Like, again, it comes back to this feedback of radicalization and polarization that it just gets worse. Like, look at, we talked about this before, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but look at what happened with Cuban Americans and Venezuelan Americans in Florida. These are not people that previous to 2016 were necessarily hardcore Republican
Cubans
voters.
were turning Democrat. This is, again, I know we've talked about it. Cubans voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Venezuelans before 2016 were not particularly Republican either. It was pretty split. But when you have one party who's doing lip service to what Venezuelans want to hear, regardless of if it's honest or not, when they're calling out Maduro, when they're calling out the dictatorship, when they're calling out socialism as a bad thing, which is a thing that a lot of us can relate to, when they're calling out the Cuban dictatorship, when they're calling out the Nicaraguan
and this is not only Hispanics, by the way, Ew. This is people who fled the Soviet
Eastern
Union,
Europeans,
this is Vietnamese
yes,
immigrants,
absolutely,
this
100%.
is South Korean.
And then on the other side of the aisle, you have a guy that on a national debate it's defending the Cuban dictatorship, and we all know who it is. It's Bernie Sanders. Uh,
El tío Bernie, como ellos sí calls him tío Bernie. Hispanics don't like Tío Bernie. No matter how many times AOC is gonna call him Tío, it's not gonna work out with us.
it's obvious where things are gonna go at the end of the day, and this is something that makes me incredibly mad. As someone who is not conservative, I'm the furthest thing from. I will consider myself the furthest thing from conservative, at least socially, as it can be. Seeing so many people, so many friends and family members that were radicalized because they bought into this notion, because the populism from the right took advantage of it and the populism from the left pushed them away from it.
It's a perfect storm.
It's a perfect storm for political radicalization. And this is just one little pocket of the North American landscape. This is happening all over. This is happening with the working class Americans. Now, not talking about race, but talking about class.
It's the same thing, exactly. That's a good point. Like,
it's happened. Look at what happened with African Americans, with Black Americans, who a lot of them were not buying into abolish or defund the police narrative.
And at the end of the day, Ale, you and I always talk about this. People vote based on their wallet. So what we're going to see in these midterms is not going to be pretty for the Democrats, no matter how much they're trying to sell that buy. Now, have you seen this narrative being built recently about dark Brandon?
I love it. I love it. You know, I'm all for shit posting. I love it.
Yeah, but no one is standing Biden. Like, the whole... I don't even know how that conversation is being just created. No one is standing Biden. People are struggling, and this is a global thing. I'm not saying Biden is to blame. We knew this was going to happen. We've been through just a horrible 2 years. We're still going through it. But if there's one thing about political science, people don't care about race, about like class. They care about their wallet when it comes to voting.
Not most people, but the people who do care, they're making a lot of noise on the internet, and those are the ones that are fighting.
Right. So, but you know what they're gonna say? Like, mark my words. After these midterms, you're gonna start seeing the think pieces. Why are minorities not voting for King Biden? It's because they're racist, or it's because they're misinformed. It's like, no, honey, people can't afford food.
Oh, speaking of which, we almost forgot to talk about it. So there's this polemic is so stupid. So James Franco,
I'm obsessed with this one though.
James Franco, we all know James Franco.
First of all, wasn't he canceled in the Me Too era? I think now everyone's.
Oh yeah, he's a piece of shit. But this is a whole different conversation. So James Franco, the canceled guy, the bad guy from Spider-Man, he was casted to play Fidel Castro on a movie.
First of all, what really upset me is why are we making... that movie's going to be enraging. It's going to make him look like the sexiest, coolest motherfucker that ever lived.
I don't know where that movie's coming from. I don't know if this is going to be...
Actually, no. Javier Bardem is the director. So
I don't know where this is going to... I'm going to wait and see what happens with the movie. If the movie is an honest movie and really... And, they do their research and they talk to Cuban people...
Please keep this clip. Ew has hopes. That's cute. Keep the clip.
My hopeful self wants to think that this movie has the probability of being an actual honest movie. If they do their research, if they talk to Cuban people about their experiences, if they talk to historians about what happened
in Cuba. What makes you think that?
Let me finish! Then it can be a good movie. Maybe an okay movie. If Hollywood goes Hollywood and they go full woke, full liberal and stupid, it's just gonna be Cuban dictatorship apology. And I would hate to see that, and that's most likely what's gonna happen. So if you ask anyone from Cuba or Venezuela or Nicaragua or anyone who's not running on the inside in America, what really pisses us off is that we're making a movie about Fidel Castro and that we're making him look like the good guy. If that's what ends up happening. And that's what might end up happening. But
the white people...
But the white people, they are mad because they're casting a white guy to play Fidel Castro, who, by the way, was a white
Was
guy.
white.
Like this again, this like shows the stupidity of the whole race
But the funniest
obsession that
thing
these guys
is,
have.
the funniest thing is that whenever we talk against Chavismo or Castrismo, we get all the white first worlders telling us like, "Oh, you only didn't like Fidel because you're white," and it's like, no,
Are
actually,
you listening, Tim?
Fidel is white,
This is
just
with you,
like
Tim.
you, just like James Franco, who's gonna play him, and like but it's funny because I tweeted about this when because
They
people
just
started
baited
tagging
you.
me on it. Clearly, like people who follow me knew that I would be pissed just that they're making a movie to make him seem cool. So I'm like, right. So I'm like, oh my god, kill me! Like I didn't even think about the race thing, and then I started seeing people saying like, oh, how dare they? He's not Cuban. But you know, I just made this connection, Edu, because Javier Bardem is the director of the movie, and he faced controversy because he played Desi Arnaz, Lucy's husband from I Love Lucy. And the white people were very upset that a Spaniard was playing a Cuban. So I
You know
think
what
this is
sucks,
Javier
dude?
Bardem, and he
That
was very
this-
like adamant, like I don't care, like I'm
It's
doing it. and it's okay.
the American discourse. Let's be honest, pop culture worldwide, it's whatever happens in American pop culture. If there is a segment of culture that the United States still holds an imperialistic grab in the rest of the world, it's in pop culture. And unfortunately, this notion
Yeah.
of white wokeness, it drips down to woke people, and often very privileged people in other regions of the world, including Latin America, including Europe, including Asia. Although I haven't seen it in Asia,
Yes.
but in Latin America, you can see it a lot.
And it is the rich people because they're the ones that have the most
Obviously,
access to American culture.
Exactly. People that are very privileged, very rich, and often than not, white Latin Americans are the ones that are falling for this narrative. And then you see things like, and this is a personal take, and I know some of my friends might disagree with me, but if you guys have heard of Rosalia, she is a singer, an artist from Spain, and she's great. At least I really like her first stuff that she started to put out. And then she kind of evolved into a more like she started being more like a very fusion artist. She would like mix flamenco and like Spanish music with Spanish from Spain music with like pop, and made a really beautiful, distilled, perfect content. But then she started doing like more like reggaeton, more like Latin American rhythms, and a lot of very privileged Latin Americans started saying that, oh, look at this girl appropriating Latin American culture. And that for me is so painful, because instead of us looking inwards, reflecting on our own issues and the way that race relationships and class relationships affect all of Latin America, and creating our own narrative to progress past this point where we are. And full disclaimer, Latin America, it's a shithole of racism, of classism, of misogyny that...
But it's different.
But
it's different than how it is in the US.
And that's the point. And that's the point. And the privileged people who, for whatever reason, have access to this discourse and could have the opportunity of saying, okay, look, in the rest of the world, they're talking about feminism. They're talking about anti-racism. They're talking about all these great things. Let's see how we can look inwards and create something from there so we can combat our own issues. Instead of doing that, they just copy and paste whatever is being taught at NYU and universities in Los Angeles, and they try to apply that to a Latin American context. And for everyone else in Latin America, that's just fucking stupid. Because if you're not as immersed in this North American woke discourse, that thing coming from a fellow Hispanic, it just sounds so stupid.
I think that's like the final like American imperialism that remains strong. That like cultural pull that we.
Cultural
It's like
imperialism.
now that I think of it, I've been appropriating American culture my whole life. Like
Mhm.
singing to Britney when I was 7. Was that appropriating American culture?
You cannot appropriate culture. I mean, you can, but it's not like
It's so dumb. Like I think I've talked about this before. Do you know what's the like idea that you see? You think of an American cowboy. He's on his horse, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, where does the horse come from? From the freaking colonizers. There were no horses here. It's you know, it's all and it's beautiful and it should be like that. I think that's like the point of the melting pot.
That's the idea of the melting pot. But instead, what we're doing is we're separating ourselves even more, and we are doing it from a notion that we are so much better than the other, and the other being your.
It's our new religion.
It's our new religion. It's I'm progressive, you're conservative, or I'm conservative and you're progressive. And what I was gonna say is that in the context of Latin America, these people that are very woke and they want to replicate the discourse of woke North Americans, what they do is that they end up alienating their fellow Latin American people, and then they push them further to the right. And now you start seeing the same reactionary white supremacy-ish type of people, the Charlottetown people, like the most horrible people that you can see. Now you're starting to see that in Latin America, which doesn't make sense. Why are there brown white supremacists in Latin America? That doesn't make sense.
But that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that racism and classism in Latin America are completely different than they are here because we're all mestizos and people are still racist against each other, but it doesn't really make sense. It's like I always
it
say,
doesn't make sense.
like whenever I see, South American being racist against Central America, I'm like, okay, that's cute, but to white American, you're both Mexican.
Of course, it's fucking stupid. It's like same thing in South America. Like people from Venezuela would be racist for people from Peru, and people from Peru would be racist with people from Venezuela. And everyone hates Argentina, and Argentinians love themselves, but they hate themselves. It's weird. But what we're doing is that by adding this reactionary woke versus conservative notion from North America to Latin America, A, it doesn't apply to our reality, and B, we're not solving any issue. We're making things way worse. We're contributing to polarization. And if there's a region in the world outside of North America that's falling very quickly for polarization and left versus right and me against you, it's Latin America. And that's definitely one of the things that we're going to talk in a future episode. But for today,
I did want to add Joanna Hausman's tweet about the Fidel movie controversy because I
Yes.
think she put it perfectly. She's a Venezuelan American comedian.
we love her.
Yes, and she said something like, "This was the producers when they were casting who was gonna play Fidel, thinking about James Franco, and they're like, well, he's not Latino, but he is an asshole, so it works." I love that.
And some food for thought. People say that Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau,
You love this.
Justin Trudeau, it's the illegitimate son of Fidel Castro. Look at the pictures. Google Fidel Castro and Justin Trudeau. Now, I'm not one to spread misinformation. I'm not known for that. I could be. But do your own research. And remember, white people, they should have pink nipples. Look
Oh
at
my
Justin Trudeau's nipples.
I disavow these statements. I just want to say I disavow.
Bye, everyone. See you on the next
Bye, guys.
episode.